Hi all, I'm Nick Kolakowski, host of Tech Connects, where we dig into all aspects of the tech industry and tech recruiting that matter to you. For this latest episode, I'm chatting with Dr. Rebecca Swift, Senior Vice President Creative at Getty Images. We're going to dig into the rise of AI-generated imagery and how that could have a huge impact on how companies source their photos and videos for the foreseeable future. This isn't just about legal risks and copyright. Dr. Swift and I are going to get into issues like creativity and trust that AI inevitably brings up. So let's listen in. Dr. Swift, thank you for being on the program. And it's great to have you here. I'm assuming that everybody in our audience knows what Getty is, but they might obviously not be familiar with what you do at Getty. So I was wondering if you could just give kind of a quick breakdown before we get into all the AI goodness about what you do.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Nick, and thanks for having me. I think the thing about Getty Images is that because it is a platform, and people tend to go to the platform and see all these amazing images. There's this kind of assumption that they appear out of nowhere, but actually we have a large creative team at Getty Images, and my role is running that team. So we have, people who are working with photographers and filmmakers on set, who are building out shoot plans, who are art directing and producing, and just day to day, running around creating content. We also have a team within Getty Images that are visual researchers. So we are a community of well over 500 million creators. And while everybody who works with us is a freelancer and has their own, business, and we represent them, we do spend a lot of time understanding, how the market's evolving, how brands especially are kind of evolving their visual language, and sharing that information with our creator community. And that's really, part of the relationship that we have with our creators. And so the visual research team are not only looking at the type of content that's being searched and interacted and downloaded with on our sites, because obviously we have Getty Images, we have iStock, and we have Unsplash. So we have the consumer view, the small business view, and the large kind of enterprise view as well. But they're also looking at how content is being used more broadly. So, how do we interact with content on social media, for example? That tends to be the place that we all look at stuff now, and we're running consumer research all the time, looking at how people react to certain types of content, how we feel about brands that use a certain subject matter or certain style of imagery. So we're kind of testing the consumer view against the B2B view that we tend to get from our own data. And we're going to talk about AI, I'm assuming. And I think, one of the big things that we've been looking at as a business is how does the general public view AI generated content? Not how the industry is talking about, definitely not how the media is talking about it, because the media is talking about it a lot, but actually as consumers, how do we feel about businesses that are using AI content?
Yeah.
So that's a big part of what we do within the creative team.
It's amazing. I started out as a journalist for glossy magazines, writing fashion spreads and things like that. This is way back in the day. So I mean, I'm fully cognizant of kind of the enormous amount of work that photographers and creatives and so on pour into doing not just those kinds of shoots, but basically any shoots, travel shoots, anything, kind of along those lines, and when I say forever ago, it's also, back in the day when everybody had teams of assistants, and which I assume is still the thing, but I mean, it seems like it's maybe a little less prevalent than it used to be.
I think, in similar to what you're saying, Nick, I think in the many decades that I've been involved in the business, where we've gone from a much slower analog process, and therefore more people have been built into that process, to the expectation of digital photography, which you can shoot as much as you want and therefore it becomes cheaper, to, let's just get, user generated content. Let's get the community to shoot it. Let's get people on the street to shoot it. To now AI, where it's like, oh, it's free. We've kind of, everything's got squeezed, and the turnaround time and the expectation of cost has changed. And so, I like, most businesses similar to ourselves, we have had to find ways to be able to kind of, still get to the same quality, but without the extra assistance and all those extra costs that get built into a photo shoot.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. So, I guess, if we're plunging into the AI discussion, and in fact, it's interesting because as we're recording this, I was just going over Google I/O, which rolled out a bunch of AI imagery and AI video announcements. It seems like every company out there is issuing, not every company, but every company that's focused on AI visuals are producing these tools that seem to be increasingly sophisticated in terms of the imagery that it produces, in terms of the sophistication that it can deliver in response to even the kind of a very bare bones prompt. And it makes me think, like a lot of people out there who are trying to source their imagery might be tempted to just, as you said, like AI is free and go in there and like type something in the Sora and spit out an image and hey, yo, you're done. But I'm just kind of wondering, there's a balance here, and I'm wondering kind of what the point is, as we see sort of this AI content sort of consume the web. What leads people to embracing human imagery instead? Like, what leads them to, saying to themselves, this AI might be free. I could tailor the prompt to do what I want with it. But, what these people shot over here that I'm finding on Getty is so much more attractive that I'm going to go for this, even if there's a cost, even if there's some sort of added lift. How do you see that dichotomy? How do you see that discussion?
It's been, I have to say, I think the last 18 months to 2 years has been a really, really interesting time for exactly what you bring up in that question, in that there was a lot of excitement about AI content because it looked different. And I think that as humans, and definitely as creatives, we like the new, we like the ability to source a different type of image and a different type of visual. It seemed exciting because it was, it gave the ability to visualize your wildest imagination. If you're not an illustrator or not a CGI artist, that type of ability, it was not as easy to come by, and so to be able to kind of bring your ideas to life using AI Gen is a great tool, and I still believe that's a great tool. I think when it comes to using AI Gen versus, for the sake of this conversation, the photography, then I think in the end it's a judgment in terms of how, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to talk about authenticity and real people and real emotions? Are you trying to tell a story that's based in truth, that's based in the real world and has real people, real dates, real places? Then using AI Gen, you kind of have to put a whole narrative around that as to why you're using the AI Gen versus, well, just an image from the real world. If you're talking about something fantastical and new and futuristic, then I can understand why you would use AI Gen. What we are finding, interestingly, and this has been the shift in the last year, I'd say, maybe even shorter than that, is the distrust of AI Gen content. And I think, for every brand, every media company that we work with, trust is core to what brands are trying to do. You want your customers to trust you. And what's happening because of the kind of the early usages of AI Gen, where we're seeing, deep fakes, and we're seeing content that's we thought was real and then turned out to not be real. It's kind of shifted the conversation away from, is that AI or not AI, to, I'm not going to trust that until I know it's a real image. And that has been that's happened really, really quickly. And I think that's got everything to do with how visually sophisticated we are as human beings, because we are, by nature visual, but also because we're all photographers at this point. And so that trust thing, I think, is going to be the sticking point especially for commercial companies.
it makes total sense, and it reminds me actually. The other day, I had what was billed as a quote unquote lunch and learn with a bunch of IP attorneys who were discussing
Oh, yes.
a lot of these issues, and they were because there was a lot of editors and journalists and content creators on the
Mm.
call, and the issue that kept cropping up again and again, I thought it was really interesting, was that nobody was quite sure about the legality of AI generated imagery in the sense of, if they use an AI image, were they going to get sued because somebody's copyrighted image had been used as part of the training data set? Or, if there was an element, if the AI spit out something that was a little bit too similar to another photo out there that was copyrighted, that somehow that would open the door to a potential lawsuit or something like that. And I'm talking, everyone on this call was somebody who wrote for a commercial publication, so obviously there's a lot of money potentially at stake if you make the wrong decision. And I guess, I mean, what is the state of all that in terms of, like, and you were saying about trust, I mean, in terms of like the legality of it as well. I mean, is it the sort of thing where using AI imagery can open people to lawsuits? I mean, I have zero idea where those legal lines fall. And on the call, it didn't seem like the lawyers were like, just don't use AI imagery at all. Like, and it was interesting. Or it was like, if you're going to use AI imagery, go to a service where you can get the license for that AI image and like follow the same procedures you would do with any other photograph, but like don't mess around with having a generator produce an image for you without any of those guardrails in place. I mean, everyone left the call more confused than they went in. I'm just wondering, wondering what your opinion on it is, because it was usually there's some clarity when you have to sit with lawyers for 2 hours, and there just wasn't in this case in any way, shape, or form.
I think, yeah, and law and regulation is catching up with tech, and I think that there will be this period of confusion. I will give you our viewpoint as Getty Images. I think, we're in the licensing business. We're in the, that's IP is everything to us, and our entire business is based on not infringing other people's IP, ensuring that we don't use other people's copyright or trademarks in our own content, making sure that people who appear in our content have given us permission and have signed releases, and also private residences, etc. We have where property releases for. So we've spent the last 30 years building a business based on all of that work. So the tool that we've created has all of that built in. I don't think there are any other tools, as far as we're aware, that have those same safeguards built in. So with any tool that you're using, and some of the most popular ones are open source tools, they are, as we all are very, very aware, scraped from the web. And the web doesn't care so much about those things. And so if you are an owner of IP, then the chances are that your competitors could be using content that has your IP in them. But again, this is something that comes up a lot with our customers, is that somebody in your marketing team, if you've got a brand, could unwittingly use your competitor's IP. Because it's inherent in what you're doing. So I think there's a number of things. There's the ethics of using content that has been essentially stolen from creators. So again, if you're a business that really is based on creators and creativity in the creative community, what are you doing? And we've had some great examples of brands who have used AI gen, and then there's been a backlash because they haven't used their own creative community in their own advertising, and I think that's an interesting point in itself. But then there's the kind of the commercially safe aspects of using AI. So all of the stuff you talked about with IP lawyers. I think the issue is when it comes especially to copyright, a non-human produced content can't be copyrighted, and so the only thing that can be copyrighted is the prompt. And even so, there have been cases where the only way that you could prove that it's your prompt, because every time you run that prompt, you're going to get a different response, is actually to video record the entire prompting process and to prove that that image that you got from that prompt is yours. And that's a lot of work. Personally, I would prefer to be running around with photographers on a set doing great work with amazing models and beautiful locations, rather than video recording myself tapping away on a computer. But we'll see.
It's I mean, the whole videoing of the prompt is an angle I really hadn't thought of, and that's sort of terrifying. Like that's terrified in a certain way when you think about like kind of the complexity building on everything. But some companies are going to make that decision to use AI generate content, like it or not. I mean, like some executive is going to say, like, I don't want to spend the money on, human generated things. So therefore, you're just going to have to go to your open source tool. No matter how everyone complains, that's just going to kind of pan out. So, I mean, you brought up kind of the trust issues, and I'm wondering, like, let's say you're a creative who's in that sort of conundrum where you're jammed up and you have to like you're sort of being dictated that you're going to have to use all AI generated imagery from here on out. I mean, what do you think are? I mean, like, what are the implications of that? Like, second, third order effects. How does that roll down, and like, how does a creative? I mean, sort of armor themselves or sort of adapt to that sort of environment? Because I mean, it's really tough, especially for people who don't, are ambivalent about AI or whatever, have to use it. But unfortunately, it also seems like that's the way of the world for a lot of like websites and publications. I mean, what's your, as you think about it as a framework, I mean, do you have any advice for people facing that?
I mean, AI certainly has benefits when it comes to modification. I think again, we've seen a lot more modification happening than pure generation. And I think that's where there could be some really interesting work that comes out as making marketing is always on. It's 24/7, 365 days a year, and as a result, we need lots of different versions and different iterations of the same image. And I think AI is great for that, but that's more in the kind of the mod kind of world rather than the gen world. I think again, we've spent many hours prompting and playing with all of the different tools, and it's time. It takes time, and it's a skill that does need to be learned. If you're working in imagery and you've spent 20 years, becoming a fantastic photographer, it's probably going to take you a good amount of time to become a great prompter. So it's a different skill. It is a different skill, and I think the only way you learn is by doing more of it. I think that the hardest thing to do is to replicate real life content, because it's never going to be truly authentic. And there'll always be something quirky and a bit weird from AI. We keep hearing this kind of, the future is AI, and it's going to be great in the future. It's 5 years from now. It's going to, you won't be able to tell the difference between photography and AI. Well, at this point, we're not adding to those data sets in a way that's going to help improve that content. We have what we have. And there's a lot of talk in my world around the biases that are built into to AI, because we have 25 years of digital content from the internet that has all of those stereotypes built in. And so breaking those stereotypes, or even thinking forward, creating content that's relevant for the how we want the world to be, is going to get harder and harder. And so I think there will be aspects of AI Gen that will be really useful, and we've seen some great examples where looking back or being nostalgic or kind of bringing the past into the future is interesting, and visually kind of there's a curiosity around it. But trying to replicate the real world is a lot trickier than I think people realize.
It's problematic. The other thing too. So I have a buddy who's a magazine photographer, and he actually shifted into being more of a commercial photographer. And his differential against AI is that he is shooting hyper local. Like he lives in San Diego. He's shooting breweries. Like, and it's very obviously AI is not going to. People aren't going to use AI to replicate like commercial shots for a brewery's website. So he's kind of gone local and gone small in order to counteract that. But he and I were talking the other day, and this actually leads to my last question, which is he was wondering how, like, when you use humans, or you use a service that allows you to kind of narrow on down on human generated creative, you can sort of maintain an aesthetic consistency. You can maintain kind of a creative control over how things look and so on. And with AI, as you were saying before, every time you enter a prompt, you get something different. It's kind of like a slot machine in a certain weird way, oftentimes. So, I mean, I guess as the question is, I mean, for creatives, as these AI tools take hold, and as people are using a mix, of AI and human creative and so on. How do you maintain that sort of unique vision? How do you maintain like kind of the creative and aesthetic consistency that, I mean, even if executives aren't demanding it, I think any like self-respecting creative like wants things that like are aesthetically of a piece that like look good, etc. What's the approach to that? Because I'm sure that's another thing that you're thinking about quite a bit.
In terms of getting down to something that's really really, I'm going to use inverted commas, real, or
Yes, exactly. Yeah, perfect.
yeah. I think what always interests me, and again, I'm gonna sound like an old woman here, but I kind of, over time we have had various technological advances which have been, come in, as a tidal wave, and have had an impact on our industry and the visual industry at large. And even if I think about Photoshop, when Photoshop first launched, the ability to retouch easily and quickly for the first time meant that there was this massive trend of a lot of super shiny skinned people, and everything was super perfect and super sharp, and there was no errors in any images, and it was really, really defined the era of that type of imagery. And I feel like with AI as well, there is an aesthetic that is hard to get away from, and so naturally there's a counter trend to that. There's always whether it's the creative industry, whether it's human beings or whatever, we go, okay, well, that's there and everybody's doing it and it's really easy, and we're no longer the experts in that, so where should we place our expertise? Well, we'll place our expertise in places where there is where we can kind of prove our creativity and the quality of what we do, and whether that's photographing things that have not been captured before. And I think what you were talking about with your friend who's hyper local, that is a great example of that. And we see that in countries around the world where there are the less visualized. And so there's a lot, there's more interest in that. There's more interest in, visualizing, aspects of our lives now. And I think, one of the pieces of research that I'm going off on a tangent here, but
so it's fine.
Stop me if you need to. But, one of the pieces of research we did was looking at what was in the data sets of these the big models. And what they lacked a lot of the time were things like the stuff that we care about now, the environment, sustainability, climate change, etc. Very, very difficult to generate content other than the kind of the shocking content that you see in the news media. But commercial content was much harder. The same thing, working from home for 20 odd years of content creation was not the same as working from home since the pandemic. And so kind of getting real, authentic images of people working at home as the way we do now is really difficult. But that's kind of a part of how we all work now. So I think, there will always be a counter trend to a large visual trend. And, there will always be this, the spectrum of the need for integrity, authenticity, whatever, to that's less of a problem. It can be shiny and fantastical and CGI, AI gen, put whatever word is currently in vogue into that. Yeah.
Gen AI, I think agentic AI and Gen AI are like read a white paper, talk to people. That's always what's going flying around. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. This it's a complicated world, but I think that it all sorts out one way or the other. I think that people, have a creative sense, know how to, hopefully navigate everything that's happening and they'll make the right decisions. I mean, at least by the publications and so on that they're trying to get imagery for. But thank you for providing some clarity, because I mean the other thing too is like everyone seems to be talking about AI and like nobody really seems to be like nobody has. It's bizarre that for the amount of money and chatter around AI, a lot of people just don't have any clarity. So I think I really like this discussion just because I think that what you're saying I think will probably hopefully help people um, narrow their thinking, well, not narrow their thinking, but like kind of get a little bit sharpen their thinking a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I really wanted to understand in all of the research that we've been doing is whether AI gen, not whether brands can get away with using AI gen, because again, we know that's deeply problematic. You don't deceive your customers, but whether there was a tolerance for it, and at what point does that tolerance kind of shift into no tolerance? At what point will consumers turn away from a certain type of content? And from what I can see, there isn't a huge amount of tolerance at all, unless it's in that very kind of churny, I'm going to use the word slop because that's the word that everybody's using, kind of style of digital advertising. When you're churning through a lot of content yourself, you are willing to give that content a millisecond of your time. But when it comes to advertising, marketing, promotion, there's a business that sits behind it, the tolerance is much lower. And there's an expectation that a company has a reason for using AI Gen. And if they do, they let you know that they're using AI Gen. I think that's the other thing. We haven't really discussed that. But, the need to label content in the correct way.
That's another issue as well. I mean, it's really, it's disturbing how, not just from like, to loop back to what I was talking about before in terms of the legal discussion. I mean, obviously like that, there's a legal aspect to like, labeling, not labeling, et cetera, et cetera. But then also, I mean, there's kind of an ethical thing as well, I would think. I mean, maybe people aren't thinking about it in that framework, but I mean, at least from my perspective, like you should say when something's AI generated,
yeah,
just because, and I can't really put my finger on like why that should be shown. It just feels ethically correct to do it. I don't know. Like, I mean, somebody could probably write some long philosophical treatise on AI versus humanity in terms of that sense, but I can't articulate it myself.
I think we just don't like to be lied to, and for some reason, AI seems to have been associated with not being truthful, and so we hopefully we'll never see AI gen content in news. Hopefully we'll never see it in anything to do with real time events. But then we could argue that in advertising, none of it is real, but there is still this expectation that we are being shown something that we can relate to in the real world, that it is a real person, especially when it comes to people. I think the whole ethics around using, for example, there have been a number of fashion brands like Mango and Levi's who have used AI generated models. That has not been received very well.
No, and especially since, I mean, it used to be you knew instantly you were looking at an AI generated human model because they would have 6 fingers or like, like an eyeball would be growing out of their forehead or something like that. And now, in fact, I saw a video yesterday that was produced by somebody within Google that was pretty seamless. So now, as we're transitioning, I feel that despite the fact that those human models are so sophisticated, people still get kind of the uncanny valley sense. I mean, you kind of look at it's like what you're saying before about Photoshop. Like you kind of know that there's something else going on here. It's triggering something in your lizard brain.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell, I think, still just for that reason alone. There's something that's like down here that's making you realize
feel a bit icky. Yeah. And it would be a sad state of affairs if we get to a situation where we're spending extra time trying to work out whether an image is real or not. I mean, that's not necessarily a world that I would like to participate in. I'd like to, there's plenty of imagery I like looking at, which I know is not real, but then there is more that I want to look at that I know is real. So yeah, I think we're becoming more sophisticated in the way that we understand content. But and so despite the fact that the technology is becoming more sophisticated, we actually want something that's less technologically mediated. And it's really interesting how we're now seeing this shift towards analog photography again. So as the technology becomes available, and you could argue that it's kind of democratized the ability to visualize. You have a certain kind of communities that are now moving towards, well, actually, I'm going to just shoot 12 frames or 24 frames and visualize my world in a slower, more considered way.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a party the other day. Somebody had a Polaroid camera.
Yes.
Which was kind of amazing. They were just running around shooting Polaroids. I'm like, yeah, go you. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of young people are really into the little point and click cameras. I mean, they're digital, but they're kind of focusing in on old tech rather than moving onto new tech. Yeah.
No, it's nice. No, it's cool.
We always want what we haven't got, don't we?
We do. That's true. Well, that was a fascinating discussion. Here are some quick takeaways from this conversation. First, it's important to prioritize authenticity and realism for trustworthiness. When the goal is to convey truth, real emotions, or stories grounded in reality, human-generated imagery remains paramount. AI-generated content, especially for commercial purposes, faces a growing distrust among consumers who are becoming increasingly visually sophisticated, at least when it comes to AI-related stuff. While AI can create fantastical or futuristic visuals, using it for real-world scenarios without careful consideration can erode brand trust. Public is quick to question the authenticity of AI-generated images, especially when those images are intended to represent real people, places, or events. Second, it's absolutely critical to understand the legal and ethical landscape of AI-generated images. The legal framework surrounding AI-generated imagery is still evolving, creating a period of significant confusion regarding copyright, intellectual property infringement, commercial usage, and all sorts of other good stuff. Many popular open-source AI tools are trained on vast datasets scraped from the web, potentially including copyrighted material, which could expose users to legal risks. For commercial entities, it's crucial to understand that non-human produced content generally cannot be copyrighted, and proving ownership of an AI-generated image derived from a prompt can be a complex and really demanding process. You'll recall that part in the video where we were talking about somebody videoing you as you make a prompt. Imagine trying to do that throughout your entire organization anytime anyone ever tries to do anything AI-generated. It's insane. So, companies should be aware of the ethical implications of using content that may have been stolen from creators, as public backlash against brands that bypass human creative communities is a real possibility. Third, leverage AI for modification and iteration, not solely for pure generation. While AI can generate new images, its strength often lies in modifying and iterating on existing content. For industries that require numerous versions or subtle variations of an image, such as marketing, which operates 24/7 to put its brand out, AI can be an efficient tool for quick modification. This approach allows creatives to maintain a level of control and artistic direction over the initial human-generated assets, while using AI to adapt them for different platforms or campaigns. Focusing on AI as a modification tool, rather than solely a generation tool, can help maintain aesthetic consistency and quality. Next, it's important to develop new skills in prompt engineering while valuing human creativity. The ability to effectively prompt AI image generators is a distinct skill that requires time and practice to master. Tech professionals and creatives should invest in learning this skill, but without devaluing the expertise in traditional photography or visual arts. AI is a tool, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on the skill of the user. However, it's important to recognize that AI currently struggles to replicate the nuances and authentic representation of real life. Therefore, valuing and seeking out human creativity for projects requiring genuine connection, unique perspectives, and breaking existing visual stereotypes will continue to be crucial. Last but certainly not least, it's also critical to embrace counter-trends and hyperlocal content in order to differentiate. As AI-generated visuals become more ubiquitous and develop a recognizable aesthetic, similar to the super shiny look of early Photoshop, if you remember from that part of the conversation, a natural counter-trend will emerge. Creatives can differentiate themselves by focusing on authentic, unique, and often hyper-local content that AI struggles to replicate. This includes capturing specific cultural nuances, everyday realities, or niche subjects that are less represented in AI training datasets. Businesses and professionals who prioritize human-generated content that offers integrity, authenticity, and a connection to the real world will stand out as consumers demonstrate a low tolerance for AI-generated imagery, unless it's clearly labeled and used with a justifiable purpose. We covered a lot more during the discussion, so please give it another listen if you missed anything. We'll see you next time, and remember, Dice is your best resource to find the tech talent you need to fill your open roles, and for tech professionals, the best place to grow your tech career.